repeat just one or two small things, and that is I'm Brian VanHorn. I work at Mayville State University as the president. I'm kind of one of those individuals that's moved from CE, if you will, continuing education background to really CEO in a presidential position at Mayville State University, which is a regional comprehensive university in North Dakota. So I'm greeting you today from a very chilly start to my morning. The Southern Hemisphere participants will appreciate. I woke up this morning to about minus 25 temperatures and probably minus 55 to 60, I'm guessing, depending on where you were, wind chills. So I was fortunate the vehicle started and we made it to work, and the day has been great. So we'll continue on. A little bit I want to share quickly. Tina Marie, Dr. Coolidge had shared, been part of ACHE for many years, and I won't give you all the marketing aspects of ACHE, but I certainly wouldn't be where I am today without the help of ACHE, both professionally and the collegial spirit you get from an association like ACHE is really second to none in America. So I hope to do justice to the presentation today. I'm going to speak to you today from a perspective as a president. But the importance of that is in about 1998, a long time ago, I attended my first ACHE conference. And I can't promise it was 1998, but I can promise it was in the first 2 years. I didn't miss one since. And I've attended my first ACHE conference. And I'm like most people, you go to a conference, you get a nugget or two, and you go home, and you may forget the majority of what you heard, but you may pick a nugget or two out of each of those. Well, one of my first nuggets with ACHE was by a speaker at that time by the name of Dr. Susan Elkins. And Dr. Susan Elkins is also a president in today's day and time, a chancellor in her system at the University of South Carolina, Palmetto College. But she said this, and this drives my discussion today. She said, you're only as important, and I'm going to look at my notes here, you're only one provost or one president away from being out of business and continuing education. And if I don't say anything else today that you remember that, because that should drive the decisions that you make on a daily basis as a leader. So it's essential as a continuing education unit that you align your goals, your values, and your missions of your unit with what the president and the institution's values, missions, and goals are. And I'm going to tell you that's changed today from 1 year ago, or about 1 year ago, depending on where you are in the United States, with the pandemic that we've all gone through. So today's topic of pandemic perils and possibilities is perfect for continuing education, because continuing education is known for adaptability and doing things in a different way, in which exactly is what Americans' higher education system is looking at today. So Dr. Coolidge, if you'll move to the second slide. I've simply written the definition of a crisis, and I've given this one. You could probably find multiple definitions, I'm sure you can, online, but this is one that I found that I thought really summarized what's happened to us this year. A crisis is an event, a series of events, or a situation that presents a risk to the reputation of an organization, the safety and well-being of its employees and customers, and/or results in substantial damage to physical property or institutional financial well-being. Well, I'm going to focus today on the pandemic, but we all know that there's been a lot of societal changes in the last year in America as well. And that also has ventured in to the 2020 change in higher education. But today I'm specifically going to focus on the pandemic side of the COVID-19 crisis. In 2020, COVID-19 crisis really brought our country and really brought to our country and our university systems unrest in many ways. And I'm going to speak to those today, and I'm going to try to give some ideas of how we're personally dealing with them here at Mayville State University. But the one thing that's wonderful about ACHE is you learn from each other, and I'm not the only one that should be giving input into this presentation. So I would ask you to use your chat box. Dr. Coolidge is going to watch that for us. And as you have questions and or comments, and I do welcome comments because I want to learn as well. That's the benefit of ACHE, about how you're doing some unique things to really handle your challenges. So if I could, Dr. Coolidge, this next slide. I'm going to ask three questions, and you're going to say why these questions. If at least I would have, if I hadn't been in the role that I'm in today. 10 years ago, this would have been my question. Why are you asking if we're public or if we're private? Why are you asking if the university is overbuilt with brick and mortar? And why are you asking about what portion of your budget is in an auxiliary type of a unit? Well, my perspective's changed over the last 3 years. This is my third year as president here at Mayville State University. The reason I asked about public or private is probably more apparent, and that is public universities get some portion of their money, differing in every state and region to some degree, but and also whether you're research one, comprehensive, every state is a little different, but some portion of your budget comes from the state subsidy. So dollars from state appropriations. If you're private, you generally do not have that state appropriation side or help from a state. The one reason I mentioned private in this is something that little would know, very few would know, is public and private both have benefits and disadvantages. I'm not here to debate that. They're both outstanding in their rights. But private institutions in the last year have had substantial help in some cases, not all, and I'm sure we have some private institution individuals on this. In some cases, they've had help because they could apply for PPP loans when public enterprise could not. So there's been assistance from both public and private that came from different perspectives. Just something to consider as we think through our presentation. And most people wouldn't know that public institutions couldn't apply for PPP loans, but I know that because of checking into it this year. So that's one of the differentiations in where you are right now financially. The second piece is, have you overbuilt with brick and mortar? The answer is the majority of American institutions would probably write yes on this, and the simple answer. I remember, and I wrote down in my notes, and I don't know if we have anybody here from the University of Oklahoma, but I remember about 10 years ago, and I look at a plaque in my office, and it was about 10 years ago when I was at the University of Oklahoma as a guest. And at the time, I was astonished. They were doing, and if anybody's here from the University of Oklahoma, please feel free to chime in chat-wise, and we'll try to answer that. But I remember going across their campus, and it seemed as if every single building was having some kind of renovation or new project going on. They had 1 billion, that's a B, $1 billion worth of campus renovation going on. And I remember sitting there from a school of about 11,000 to 12,000 thinking, this is incredible in a positive way. They're building, they're adding on, they're renovating everything. This is incredible. Well, as Paul Harvey says, the rest of that story is it was about 5 years later, and the University of Oklahoma had seen a downturn in their economy, their state coffers. And at that time, they started downsizing in terms of some of their CE units. So what's good today doesn't necessarily mean it's good tomorrow. So has your university overbuilt with brick and mortar? I'm going to speak a lot from first person. In case of my institution where I'm at, we're blessed not to have overbuilt. Fact is, we've underbuilt, and that's to our benefit in today's day and time. Not always to our benefit. 2 years ago, I would have said it was not, because it was hard for me to find space for a visiting professor to just sit in an office. We had about 3 on our entire campus that we could sit somebody in. So it was pretty difficult. But in today's day and time, that's helped us because we don't have as many pressures with some of those bonding issues. And then last but not least, what is the portion of your budget that is auxiliary? At many institutions, not all, your auxiliary unit will be anywhere from 10% of your entire budget all the way up to 40%, depending on the institution. It can vary greatly. And in our case here at Mayville State University, that usually rounds out to about 25%. Usually about a quarter of our budget is auxiliary. And that will ebb and flow a little in percentages, but that's pretty close. Here's the reason I ask that. Your auxiliary units are primarily, when I speak of them, I'm thinking there's a lot of additional ones. CE can be an auxiliary unit in terms of making money for the institution, and that's a great position to be. Your auxiliary units are your bookstores, your dorms, your cafeteria, and anything anything else that students would pay an additional fee for. And that's a really important part of the equation that we're going to talk about today is leading during the pandemic is your auxiliary units, because of the use of those dollars for general budgetary needs at universities, have really been impacted by the pandemic. So, Dr. Coolidge, if you'll move me to the next slide. And that is key points. So my intention here has been to give you just some key points of things that I'm going to talk about, but I do want it to be more of a discussion. The key points are, I looked at and you'll see it documented here. Michael Velasquez wrote an article for the Chronicle of Higher Education, and I'm going to give you all of these references at the end and several articles in which you, if you want further information, you can go to. So you don't have to worry about writing down the articles themselves. They will be provided to you. So I'm going to work from really these 5 pieces because this is what moves a president's cheese right now. This is the important critical stage and the important critical aspects of a president's decision making. And the first is campus mental health. The Velasquez survey that looked at roughly, and I read it 2 weeks ago in preparation for this, and I'm sorry I don't remember exactly, it was roughly 300 presidents. It wasn't 30. It was a large summary survey of presidents. The number one challenge that presidents saw on their campus was campus mental health. We've done our own surveys here on our campus, and we would echo that to some degree. And you say, well, how can CE really affect that? Well, in a couple of different ways. CE can really play important pieces in a couple of these other bullets, which helps with the campus mental health. One of the things that we've done here at our institution, we're a small, comprehensive regional. I mentioned that earlier. We've added an additional counselor this year to our campus. And that additional counselor was really brought in to help with faculty and staff. We've given time to our faculty and staff to seek guidance and counseling on our campus, because what we learned when we did our own surveys were they were concerned. So many of our colleagues and so many of our spouses, significant others have been impacted by COVID-related issues and the pandemic, which then trickles over into even our own employees and the challenges that they have at home. How many on here, and you don't have to show me, if I'm not as good of a virtual learner as I am a residential learner because I like to see hands and faces, but there's a lot of us that have children that are on this call, I would suspect. I can only imagine those, and Dr. Coolidge is a friend, and I know she has a son that's in high school. Almost every young person in America has been impacted, K through 12, with the cancellation of in-person learning. Almost everyone, not everyone. And so they've moved to online learning. Well, that's really created challenges in our families, because now not only does Dr. Coolidge have to get to work, but she's also got to make sure that her son's got his homework done. Does he have anything to eat at lunch if she's not there and present? There's so many challenges that people have faced through this through this pandemic that's affected their mental health. So I will kind of stop there. One thing that I would say as a keynote for this is communication is key. And presidents should not be the only ones to communicate. I'm hoping that many of you sit on your cabinet for your universities. You should be sharing resources and what's going on at the institution as much as you freely can with your direct reports and with your staffs. Because where communication becomes broken is when there's not a clear sharing of that across the spectrum. So what I say, I hope my direct reports are also saying within their own staff meetings. That way there's consensus and unity in terms of the directions that we're moving. And that's a difficult one. The other thing I'll say about campus health, because I saw this in our own surveys, people feel very isolated this year. And for good reason, we understand that. But it's something that we should consider. The second piece is one that really affects all of CE and all of higher education. And there's 2 or 3 of these that help play into this, but they broke it out differently in this article. But that's financial viability. That's a scary term. Viability is a scary term for higher education. And I guarantee, I don't know everybody on this call, there's some of you wondering if you'll continue to have your job next year. There's some of you wondering if your institution will continue to be viable. and will continue to have the enrollments that you need and all of those things. It's just a reality. And though there's no one thing that fits this, you can be part of the solutions with the adaptability and creativity that comes with CE professionals. And that's why I think that CE is essential and critical to higher education's future. It has been part of our past, but our future and our adaptability. How many times have we heard in the last 20 years, you can't do that online? In about 6 weeks, the entire country figured out how to do everything online. In about 20 years, we couldn't figure out how to do much of it online. It wasn't possible. But now you have labs online. Now you have all these other things that it wasn't possible to do because it was necessary to remain viable. And so I think continuing ed has to figure out how to position that new adaptability in this new opportunity to benefit what they do for non-traditional learners and learners away from a residential campus, however that may be formed, whether it's regional campuses, whether it's online, whether it's certificate programs, however that may be. Third bullet, enrollment challenges. This is one that I think across the board of America, we're all concerned with. And I can tell you, I wake up at 2 and 3 in the morning, wish I could say I didn't, but I do, worrying about these 5 bullets. Enrollment challenges is one of the largest ones. Because as we all know, you can do really great things, and sometimes enrollments don't come in like you expected them to do so. And sometimes enrollments come in that you didn't expect. You get both sides of that, positive and negative. But the where we have seen at our university, the enrollment challenges that have hit the hardest, we've been very fortunate. I'm down about 2%, which I expected to be down 5. So I'm very fortunate. I guarantee, I know colleagues that were within 100 miles of me or 200 miles of me that are down 10 to 20. And that's across the board. I'm stuck in the Central America, in rural America. So COVID had an impact much later on us than it did the East and the West Coast, much later. But we also hit that it always catches up, even if it's late, and we hit that same curve that everybody hit. The enrollment challenges are real for higher education. And that's where that prior question about bricks and mortar and some of those pieces are really important. Because one of the things that you have to know as a CE administrator and leader is this. What's important to my university? If your campus is overbuilt and you're very reliant on auxiliary services and funds, then you've got to figure out a way to bring students back to your campus in some way, shape, or form. You have to, whether it be hybrid learning, whether it be a normal semester, whatever it is. If you're overbuilt, it doesn't matter what you say. That's important because you can't turn off a bond payment overnight. Your bond payment is the same, whether the student's there or they're not. And it's a huge factor for leadership. And if you can help them figure out how to resolve that, then one of the ways that you may be able to do that, many of you do non-credit type of offerings in continuing ed. Sometimes that may be a way in which you can bring some individuals in smaller groups, may not be to the same scale you may have been able to do it 2 years ago, but if you can figure out ways that you can safely bring people to contribute to those things, it will really help your campus. So where we were the hardest hit with enrollment challenges this year were in areas that CE specializes in, and that was with non-traditional students that took 1 class or 2 classes and maybe were non-degree seekers. Simply, we had a large decrease in at our institution. And I'll bet you can see that across the board. I've read other research that would show that. And the second part, and I don't have an explanation for this. I would love for somebody to bring awareness to me because I don't understand this. It's a national trend, but I don't really see how this affects it is in transfer students. Our freshman class here is one of the largest we've had in the last 10 years. I'm very proud of that. We worked really hard to get to that. But at the same time, our transfer students are well down in where we were. So for one reason or another, transfer students didn't move on to a university setting after their community college experience at the same rates that we expected and or they have in the past. And I see that as a national trend as well. The scary part, that may get worse. This could get worse for our campuses. So it's just something to be aware of. Third, or the fourth bullet, excuse me, are layoffs. If I could get a show of hands again, everybody on this call probably would say there's been layoffs because of the pandemic or because of the challenges. Our universities were already stressed in many cases long before this pandemic. It was the point in which it tipped us over the top to some extent. The report I just read, and this was written back in the fall, it would be greater now, would be 2/3 of presidents say that they've already made cuts to positions on their campus, and more would be coming. Now that's really scary for higher education and not something in which I'm pleased to report. That's even more reason why CE has to be part of the solution. What moves the cheese of the institute? Go along with it. Those who've known me a long time know statistics stick in my head. That's kind of the way I work. And the statistics are, and there's a lot more ways than just these, but the auxiliary areas of dorms, cafeterias, and bookstores. Reported by this group of 300-ish presidents, auxiliaries are down 73% at those institutions. Depending on what size, this is why the prior slide, depending on what size that is of your budget, that impacts a significant amount of your budget. So the more you can figure out to bring people in to do things, if even for a day, they may get a meal in your cafeteria, even if the student is there for the day or a camp person is there for the day, that helps contribute to the auxiliary units. The second thing is room and board is down 61%. There's bond payments at every institution in America on dorms. I'm going to gloat. I was at 98% room and board this fall. I had 98% occupancy. I'm blessed. I'm just blessed. But it's because my freshman class was so large. We filled them up, and it really helped our campus. I recognize Mayville, North Dakota is very different than Boston, Massachusetts, or Los Angeles, California. I do not wish to say you can do the same thing there that we can do here. But innovative ways to help fix these problems are what your leadership is looking for from you. And then the last but not least is endowments. Endowments, private funding for institutions and scholarships in particular are down about 54% in America. That's an alarming number because in some cases, giving is up in America in some areas, but endowments for higher education reported by these 300 presidents are actually down. And those are really build that base for scholarships that you offer to potential students. One of the areas that I would push you as CE administrators, because I bet you're down in your non-traditional students, and I'll bet you're down in your transfer students in many cases, is helping develop innovative ways of reallocating your current resources to those sectors of population and figure out how you can help that non-traditional student that takes one class, even if it's $100 or $500, whatever it is, it might be enough to encourage that student to stay in school and retain with your institution and to matriculate at some point down the road, which is what all the institutions are looking at. So that's really the basis of what I wanted to talk with you about today. But now I'd like to simply hear from some of you. And Tina Marie, I'm guessing you've got some chat or hope you have some chat.
Sorry, I had to unmute there. There was a note in the chat noting that 65% of colleges/universities saw a loss in revenue derived from private gifts as well.
From credit gifts, is that what you said?
Private gifts.
Private gifts, yes.
Private gifts.
And I'm going to share, again, I'm speaking personally because I know what I know and I know what's happened at our institution. We had the largest increase in private giving that we've ever had in our institution this year. And we are minuscule compared to what many of you are in terms of your fundraising efforts. We're still somewhat in our infancy, but we raised a tremendous amount of money. And you say, well, how did you do it? Well, one of the ways we did it is we really looked to lifetime estate givers this year. And we really worked the relationships with individuals that maybe are getting in their elder years. There's not a specific number, but also 70 and above that were alumnus of our institution. And we explained to them what the challenges of these current students are. And that alone has really helped us. Now, CE, that's not really your position in CE, but I guarantee everybody that's worked in CE for 5 years has seen somebody that came through your area that you provided the opportunity for their furthering their education that has gone on and been somewhat successful. And if you can look back 25 years, you can find somebody that's been very successful. And reminding those individuals of those experiences that they had through their CE opportunities oftentimes will develop an opportunity for them to consider the next generation. And that comes with time. I've done a fair amount of fundraising at another institution, a lot, and continue to do that here. Relationships is where that's based, but it's got to start with a story, and it's usually their personal story of success and what continuing education opportunities did for them, whether a credit or even non-credit in developing leadership skills or something else that they can really tie into the institution with. So that's a very important gift, and private gifts right now, especially for the private institutions that rely so heavily on endowments and foundations, and public do as well, but privates in particular, that private money, you just have to continue to push forward with that. Other questions and or thoughts? My presentation really was derived because I want you to know what's important to your institution. It's essential that continuing education align their goals, visions, and values with what your institution's visions and values and goals are. And when you can do that, you then get a direct link into higher level administration, which is essential in times like this, because oftentimes we know in continuing education, during difficult times, they say, well, that faculty member doesn't have a full load, they're underloaded, if you will, so they can do that for continuing education. And I am one, all PhD and terminal degree faculty members are not qualified to do continuing education. Continuing education is not the traditional areas of higher education from 50 to 75 years ago. You don't start at 8, you don't go home at 4:30, and you certainly have to figure out creative ways to help every student individually have the opportunity to just show up. And that's why most of our students attend continuing education. Here's the good news. So the rest of the story for Paul Harvey. The good news is that online learning has never had more opportunity in the world. The study I just talked about, if you want to go read it for yourself, talks about the importance of online learning to higher education for our future. And continuing education has known this for 20 years. But you couldn't get everybody in the same sandbox at the same time. The good news is now everybody has figured out a way to join that. So there will be more virtual opportunities for continuing education units to work with the academic units to provide more opportunities as work goes on. I believe, as somebody that worked in continuing education related fields for 20 plus years in leadership, I believe one of your biggest challenges will be helping develop these revenue streams that helps get students started and continue through their higher education. I believe everybody needs some skin in the game, but it's hard when you've got a single mother or father with 3 children working 3 part-time jobs to have an extra 5 hours a week to take one class between their class and their study. So those revenue streams, I think, and real focus on fundraising for continuing education in the non-traditional student market, I think will be essential for our future. Questions or comments? I would like to hear a few creative things that some of my colleagues and all of you are doing. So.
Any questions from the group?
Hi, Dr. VanHorn. This is Amy Johnson at East Tennessee State University. It's good to see you, brother, on the screen. Thanks for your comments today. I think your concerns around private giving are something that has been at the forefront of our discussion too. And one of the things, just to share a little bit about, we are not among those, that 65% who lost private gift. We're actually up from where we were last year. Now that was in part because we had some strategic visioning around that goal where we sort of beefed up the staff in that area a couple of years ago. So that's the result of a couple of years of hard work. But one major pivot point was we decided to not have our day of giving this year. And instead, we launched a new campaign called Bucks Helping Bucks. And so giving really shot up in that period of time because it was focused specifically around students, faculty, and staff who were particularly affected by the crisis that we were facing at that moment. So, and we've seen our capital projects grow. And I'll tell you, a lot of that has to do with our president's relationship with really important political figures in our community and in at the State Center in Nashville. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts around the importance of being engaged in those town and gown kind of relationships that are so pivotal for things like improving giving and even capital outlays.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, and sister, as I call you. I appreciate your comments, and it's great strategic planning by East Tennessee State University, Dr. Nolan, and all of you leaders there to really work on that private giving long before the pandemic happened. We didn't know last January, none of us really knew what was going to happen to us in February or March. I remember hearing about this pandemic overseas, and we studied it a lot. We started talking about it in our leadership with the presidents in the state and the chancellor of the state in about the first day of January, maybe even the last week of December, about the what ifs. No one knew where we were going to be 3 months later. I just don't believe anybody recognized fully where we would be 3 months later in the United States. So your timing was perfect. The giving piece is really important, Dr. Johnson. And one thing I failed to say earlier, even things, especially for CE type of students, because again, I think CE students are generally those that are non-traditional and usually have struggles to come back to higher education, or they might be a residential campus student living somewhere in a dorm and yada, yada, yada. And the age doesn't matter as much as their needs. The need is what really defines, in today's day and time for me, the CE type of student. But even like our food pantries and those type of events, they've been taxed in the last 9 months like nothing I've personally ever seen. So I appreciate your example of doing away with one of your giving days and reallocating that. And I think it's very important. You know, one of the things that can be a creative way with all of our campuses would be a day of giving for the non-traditional student. Because never heard of that. We don't do that here, I can tell you. We have Giving Hearts Day and we do 2 or 3 other annual fund drives that are pretty successful for us, but not necessarily a drive exactly designated for the non-traditional type of student. And you know, Dr. Johnson, if you find your bricks and mortar are larger than what it needs to be and your auxiliaries are down and all those other things, you can even twist that into a non-traditional student that takes classes on your residential campus, if that becomes more appealing to your leadership. But I think your point is well made. There's a lot of other opportunities in today's day and time. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
I'll pipe up a little bit. Hi, Dr. VanHorn. It's so great to see you and to see all of you. It's so nice to have you start our webinar series. I've actually moved out of continuing education into the Office of the Provost as Director of Conferences and Events. And I can honestly say that my work with ACHE and continuing ed has helped with the adaptability that you were talking about earlier. And I found that, I was supposed to be doing all these events and all these things on campus, and now it's all virtual, and people don't have those skills. And I had to work on my skills. And so we've been really focused on how to get faculty to have more skills. And we're getting ready to do some things for students, but we've put on a digital dexterity conference to focus on faculty and staff. And I think something that we all have talked about for years is active learning and having that at the forefront of our teaching. And now it really is right here. You said that earlier, CE has that opportunity to really showcase. And I've been able to bring that over to my position now and hopefully teach others about how to really engage online. I mean, Zoom has a lot of tools, but people don't design it properly. And so they're not really utilizing it. So I just want to thank ACHE in general, you in particular, because you're one of the first people that I met, to help me with this adaptability that it really, really made it happen for us this year. We had to do it or not do anything at all.
Did we ever think, Patty, that we would be doing conferences virtually? And all of us have been kind of a family outside of a professional, our blood relation family through continuing education leadership in many cases for 20 years together, and certainly a long time. And now we do state meetings virtually, we do board meetings virtually. Your topic is one that's terribly important, not one that I'm terribly experienced with, but people like Dr. Johnson and Dr. Coolidge and yourself are really on the forefront of helping improve these skills for a lot of us that are becoming a little more dinosaur-like.
We have to keep up, right? And from the conference that Julie Schenkel and Amy Johnson was president and put on such a great conference, and it was such an honor to be a part of it. And it was so much fun that's why I wanted to do one for my campus. I mean, it was a totally different topic, but I think the skills that we're learning together can really help us when we go back home.
Thank you, and it's good to see you. Tina Marie, I know people will be needing to log out shortly. May I make one last comment?
Absolutely, sir.
I just really want to say the importance and the value you get from working in a continuing education type of arena cannot be underestimated or undervalued. It's unusual for people in continuing education type of positions to move up into the executive leadership type of roles, because it's just not what happened 100 years ago. This pandemic may provide just that opportunity for more people to do that, because as Patty just mentioned, the digital dexterity, the understanding of online learning that we've been doing for so many years, when you as an administrator start to look at how you help your institution and how you further your career path, don't be very bold in your ability to adapt and change, because I think we in continuing education have been doing that for a number of years. And if you can explain that through a resume or a cover letter, I think people like myself will really pay attention to that in today's day and time, because every president, she or he in America, is looking for ways to adapt to continue to be viable. So I applaud all of you for your profession and your work. It is a wonderful profession and work, and I know on a daily basis you get to see the fruits of your labor when individuals that otherwise might be marginalized end up walking across the stage and graduating and bettering their family and their entire future, and it's better for all of us. So simply thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Dr. VanHorn, thank you so very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to spend our first webinar for the Winter Spring Series. We couldn't think of a better person to have be our inaugural person for this series. And thank you so much for your time and the wonderful conversation. today. We greatly appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And I will say, Tina Marie, or Dr. Coolidge, excuse me, if you'll advance one slide, they can kind of see some of the articles that I drew upon in order to get to today, if it helps them in any way, shape, or form.
Excellent. And as a note to that, this presentation will be posted on the ACHE website, so you can reference these articles as well for future use as needed. So again, thank you, Dr. VanHorn. Thank you for opening the winter spring webinar series for us. Thank you for your time, and thank you to everyone who took the time today to attend. We are greatly appreciative to all.
Thank you.